how do we acknowledge this complexity in place and time again. So we went through a process. So there was a first selection in the morning where all the faculty and all the studio instructors were invited to participate. So there was a first selection, and every drawing that had at least 5 selections was brought down to the PIP for the final selection process. And then we have an invited jury of 6 members that has been working here for the last couple of hours, and some wonderful discussions, and really attempts at reading the storytelling that emerges from the drawings, from the titles, and from, I guess, the traces that you have left. And I also want to mention that Tim Murray, he really would have liked to be with us today, but unfortunately it ended up not being possible for him, so he wasn't part of the jury. And I guess I'd like to now introduce our jury. So we have Dr. Constantinos Avramidis, who joined us from the University of Cyprus, and will also deliver a short lecture on graffiti and architecture at the end of the award ceremony. And then my colleagues, Associate Professor Lisa Moffitt, who is also the EMARC Chair, Liet Fortin, Adjunct Professor, Isabel Potworski, who is the instructor of the drawing class in first year, Omiasu Wapasi, who is an assistant professor in the School of Architecture and the School of Indigenous and Canadian Studies, cross-appointed, and also history now. and also assistant professor Menna Aga. So these are our 6 jurors. And we thought, as a way of unfolding this process is to invite those of you who are on this board right now. These are all, I guess, selected projects. So we have the first, second, third, and 5 honorable mentions. We will start with the honorable mentions and then move along. And we don't even know yet who the students are. We haven't looked at the back. So we'll invite students to come, I guess, and introduce themselves. And if it's possible, just say a few words about the project, how you thought about the idea, the competition, the title. So introduce us to, the way you have been thinking through your drawings. And then we have one juror responding to each piece. So this is how it's going to go. And I'm going to start from that side. So we can start with our first honorable mention, which is this drawing here. I'm not sure who's the author. And if the student is here, it will be wonderful if they could join us. Yes, we can. Yeah, thank you so much.
It's Elisa Antanis.
So I guess if Elisa is not here, we'll still talk about it. We're going to put it, I'm not going to help. So, who am I inviting? Isabel. So I'm going to invite Isabel to speak about this piece on behalf of the jury. And, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll begin by saying that we had a discussion with the jury about this piece before we read the title. And the discussion was actually about how this drawing shows the life cycle of a building. And it's only after having this discussion that we read the title, and the title is Spirit of Abandonment, the Life Cycle of a Building. So just to say that in terms of storytelling and the clarity of the story, this drawing does a really great job of that. And then, well, I think that an important part is that it also integrates the elements of the brief really well. So it integrates the section and and the photo very well, so that there's this ambiguity, and it's very, very connected. It's almost like puzzle pieces being put together. So in terms of graphically and architectural representation, I think this is very successful. And also, in our discussion with the jury, we thought that in terms of showing the life cycle, that it does go through all the aspects of the life cycle of the building. So it shows a condition of, there's a hint of how the building used to be when it was new, and then we see the layer of, there's a certain poverty that is described there in the building, with the way that the curtains are hung, with the kinds of interiors that are drawn, and then also the nature that is starting to take over the building. And there's two aspects to the story that's being told. On the one hand, that there is a new life that could emerge from this building, which we see in this part going up here. And on the other hand, if that doesn't happen, the nature simply takes over the building. So we thought it was quite successful in representing the layers of time.
Thank you, Isabel and Omesu. Let's see, where shall we go? Maybe we could have the author of this drawing to talk about this honorable mention as well. Oh, and it's, oh, hi. And Isabel, you're going to have a conversation on this one as well. Yes. Yes.
I can say my name. I think I know that much. Hi, everyone. My name is Sheil, and I'm in the MArc 1 program. I also did my undergrad here. I graduated in 2019 in the urbanism program. Shout out to Ben. And essentially, my project title is called the National War Monument and the Old Post Office. And now, I did a little bit of research, and I was able to figure out that exactly where the old monument was the original post office, and it was colloquially known as the Old Post Office, even in 1867. So that's when it originally started, and basically. Hello, testing. And so as I was saying, the Parliament buildings, they initially came in and they needed a way for politicians to get mail, and this is the time of mail and the transference of large parcels, and the use of the canal was very much integrated. And so actually the building was fronting the canal as where the monument is, and that's where they would have the Inland Revenue Commission actually come and tax parcels, tax wood and goods and services like that. So essentially in 1904, the building was caught under fire, and through that process, they rebuilt the same building in the Palladian style, and they used elements of the building that were reconstructed in the fire. So in the actual drawing, I tried to recreate the kind of, I tried to show the elements of reconstruction within the drawing and the dissipation of the drawing itself. And then eventually in 1938, they eventually decided that there was no longer, they needed more space in the top stories. In the reconstruction of the fire, they decided to build a top fourth story, and that was used primarily for offices. And they eventually decided that they were going to need a lot more offices with Parliament, and that's when they built the existing post office, which is on Spark Street. So essentially, the project is trying to just show the juxtaposition between these two spaces and how that space has changed over time, in contrast to the War Memorial as it is now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we all had a really good history lesson. Thank you. I learned a lot from that. So yeah, both of us are going to present our impressions of the drawing.
Sure. Thank you so much. So our interpretations of your drawing had next to nothing to do with your description. Just going to the point that art is subjective. And so I felt that your piece represented to me, the viewer, ghosts of the past, and the post office being a particularly poignant ghost in regards to a colonial system. So as we know, this is Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, the post office representing that bastion of the colonial powers, and especially in the context of your story. But the way the drawing looks to me is it's a ghost that is haunting something. So I say, okay, well, what's it haunting? The war memorial. And so the message that I took from your very nice drawing is that when we allow the ghosts that haunt us to continue to haunt us and don't address them, we will end up with war and violence. And the furthering of that is included in the war memorial itself, which is in itself a colonial structure towards the kinds of domination and control that people all over the world have experienced. So we have the past, the future, and ghosts of all of that we need to redress. So that was my perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll just add to that and say I've never seen a drawing that's shown so clearly the idea of a ghost building that's disintegrating. And I really appreciate the way in which it is disintegrating is actually through these little, they're essentially mail that's being posted since it used to be a post office. So just the thoughtfulness of the piece really stood out for me. But also just the technically, the quality of the piece, like it's very, very well drawn. I will add that in our jury deliberations, we thought that there could have been more consciousness of the colonial aspects of this site. So that could have been integrated into the storytelling. But overall, conceptually, it's a very strong piece. So, well done.
Thank you very much, Isabel, Miasu, and congratulations on this honorable mention. I think it's wonderful, the way that this process is unfolding, because I guess, we can see how, the imagination of the drawing and the reading of the drawing are kind of two reciprocal processes, and how, there is, they really generate conversations, right? And generate ideas. So we could go maybe to this one, which is another honorable mention. And I don't know if the student who made this drawing is here with us right now. Yeah. And who is talking to this piece? You're talking to this piece. And Constantinos is going to respond to this piece.
Maya Thomas.
So it's Maya.
Mia or Maya Thomas?
Not here right now?
Not here?
Okay. Do you want to respond?
Yes. First off, thank you, Federica. I would like to congratulate each and every one of you for giving us the opportunity to, enjoy the energy of drawing today. For the particular piece, is that one? Okay. We were discussing, I think together, we were saying about that it is, although it is a futuristic sort of drawing, it felt a bit nostalgic, right? In the sense that it shows a future in a manner that it used to be, the way we used to imagine the future in the past. So it's back to the future kind of thing. I found quite interesting the way, quite literally, the future in this drawing explodes and builds up upon the past. Quite literally, it explodes it and then fits in. And and also has some elements that remind me of Saint Elias, a really interesting work. So it's also kind of a futurism of the past, and at the same time, what's quite interesting in terms of the storytelling is the multi-temporal dimensions that it adds to this existing yet new, yet again back to the stories of the past drawing. So yeah, that's what I have here in my notes. Feel free to add.
No, you covered it.
I
This is
did. Yeah, that's pretty much what we discussed during the deliberations of the jury. Again, congrats. Lovely piece. Thank you.
that's a second-year student. That's actually, I'm happy to see the
Wonderful.
Second year. Wonderful to hear. Yep. So I guess we could go to this drawing, which is also an honorable mention. And do we have? Yes, we have someone with us. And I think Liette Fortin is going to speak about this with you.
Hi, my name is Yiping. I'm in third year. I'll talk a little bit about my project. So my project is based on memories, and so this is the site is in Chengdu, China, where I grew up, so my hometown. And so I want to show how my relationship with the architecture is more based on my memories than what is built. So in charcoal, I drew what I remember from my memories, which is small local shops, so like medicine shops and toy shops, and I guess, oh, it's calligraphy and charcoal, and yeah. And Conte. So yeah, in the background, it's like the more newly developed buildings, so like the big shopping malls, and it's sometimes like it's years since I go back, and one year when I went back, I realized how much they've taken down and how much they've developed the place. So no matter how much they develop the landscape, my relationship with it will always be through my memories, where I grew up. Thank you.
That was a great description. So Liette.
Thank you very much. All of the drawings were wonderful. And this drawing in particular, first of all, it met all of the requirements of the competition with the photo, with the drawing, and with the section in your drawing. And when the jury discussed it, it was exactly what you have explained. So what you had in mind was exactly how I perceived this. And the fact that you had ink, also kind of a traditional way of drawing, captured so well the original place that you remember, superimposed on this kind of, I would say, nondescript urban scape that you see everywhere. So you could see that this place had meaning for you and that you really belong to this place. And it's kind of a sad story because so many places that we cherish disappear because these places that hold a lot of significance are often obliterated to make way for new. And being an instructor in conservation, I hope that one would take notice of what exists and build new, but in a way that doesn't obliterate, and that you don't just live in your memory, but you can still have the physical elements that are part of your visit back to your home place. So I thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Liette. So we have one additional honorable mention, and it will be for this drawing. Just, we're going to move it up a little and see. And I don't know if we have the author here and the name. Karen Colnut. Are we not sure if we are pronouncing properly or reading properly?
Oh, yeah, Karen, definitely. Karen Coleman. Yeah.
Okay. Karen Colnut. Second year? Okay. So, and this is, I think Lisa is going to respond to this piece. Probably the student not here. Yeah.
Thank you. So it was really a pleasure for me to be on the jury today. I didn't say a lot. I listened a lot and I learned a lot through our fellow jury members. And I would say this is the one exception. I talked a lot about this, and we actually didn't talk about it much amongst ourselves. So I'll tell you what I appreciated about this drawing. I think the first. I would just use the adjective immersive. It's an immersive drawing, and I think I use that term because because of the choice of perspective. So it really situates the viewer within the context, the site of speculation, and also because of the choice of media and the layering up of photograph and drawing. And I think. That's maybe a second point that I would add that I really appreciated about the work is the skillful integration of photograph and drawing. One doesn't really dominate over the other. They each play a very particular role, and they work well together compositionally. The thing that I think is maybe most interesting or important about this drawing is the context, so the site of speculation. The title of this drawing is Disappearing Communities, LeBreton Flats, Ottawa, 1962 Now. And for those of you that are familiar with Ottawa, you'll know the significance of LeBreton Flats. I'm relatively new to Ottawa, so I have relative ignorance about the context, but I learned a lot about it through the drawing. You can't see from a distance, but if you zoom in really closely, there are a bunch of text extracts from newspaper articles. There's 3 or 4 of them that are integrated into the drawing, and they explain a little bit about the history of the site. And so from what I can gather in the drawing, the LeBreton Flats was the site of a so-called slum clearance in 1962, I believe. Yep. And in one of the critiques of the project was that it was sort of, what's the right word? It was blighting the view from Parliament. And so what I appreciated about this students' work is that they chose a context that really mattered, that had a history that needed to be told. And so I would say that for me is the main trait that really won me over to this project. It's a drawing that kind of gives itself, gives back with continued scrutiny. So I'd encourage everybody to come forward and take a look at all of the drawings really in more detail when we're done. Thank you.
So I guess I should congratulate all the honorable mentions, and I guess each of these drawings won $500. And we should go now to the third prize, which is $1,000, and it's this drawing right here. Oh, wow. I know you. Judge, would you like to?
Sure, yeah. I really just want to say, oh, no. It's fine. Maybe I should stand like this, I don't know. I really just want to say that this started out as a love letter to the city of Budapest that, I'm getting emotional about it, but really took me in, people that really shown me a lot of love, and I think as a traveler, when you're by yourself, when you're like not in the best spot in your life sometimes, can really help you, right, to see the right architecture and meet the right people. So my drawing is titled Zimplikert Ghetto Shelter Ruin Bar. It takes place in the 7th district of Budapest, Hungary, between the 1930s and the present. And it was a Jewish ghetto during the war that was later left in ruin for many, many years, that became a shelter for homeless people, youth throughout time, and eventually it was restored to become a ruin bar. And what you see are depicted are drawings of people that would just come, like we were given markers and we were just told to write on the walls and leave our name behind. And I just wanted to bring that here, so I, layered a paper and let people leave their own story behind. Sorry, I'm really emotional. And yeah, thank you so much. I've never won a prize or anything, so this is cool.
Congratulations. Yes, it was very appreciated. I think Constantinos is going to respond to your piece.
It's George, right? Yeah. George. Yorgos. Ah, okay. There you go. I cannot be super objective here. It's my soft spot when it comes to graffiti. But it's not about that. What we agreed when we were looking at this drawing was that we felt that you conceptually nailed it, right? In quotation marks, not my words, right? Someone else said it. I'm just trying, saying what we've discussed. And the way you've described it makes it even better, to be honest. The thing here is that we move from architectural stories or larger stories to the everyday, to the quotidian, and it's beautifully illustrated here. Even most importantly, what we see here with the addition of the layer which is in the pen here, which transfers the logic of the walls of the particular building here, is that this is an open-ended project, quite literally. We can keep adding and removing and writing on top of each other for eternity, right? At the same time, it shows us the potentiality of architecture becoming something more than an architectural ego and becoming a scene of life. It's also a participatory project. Quite interestingly, and just to tick, you did the tick boxing here, so I do have the section. We do have the section right here, which makes it even more interesting because you quite literally juxtapose the official, so you would get the permit of the building with this constructional section and so on and so forth. So we have the official and the unofficial coming together. And again, after our discussions, some said that you killed the author. Indeed, you did so. And you transferred the agency from the architect and the architecture to all of us, which is something we need to remember, that architecture is multi-authored at the end of the day. And you killed the imagined neutrality of architectural drawings, if I may say. That's all from me. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Constantinos. So I guess now we're going to go to the second prize, which is $1,500, and it will be this drawing. I think you're going to talk about this. Yes, of course.
I'm going to hold it up or take it so everybody can see it. So that we can show you.
You can go first.
Okay. Hello, my name is Sonia. I'm a third-year student. I guess I'll try to go through what this project was about. This was essentially revisiting a project from second year, actually. Last year, we had a project that was to build something along the locks right by the campus. During that process, I thought it was a really lovely project. I had a lot of fun. I ended up centering it on a really big tree that many of you, or some of you might be familiar with, that was on just on the edge of the lowest lock. So unfortunately, this lovely tree, it fell down during the storm in May. And at the time, I had documented the fallen tree. I'd taken some photos because I thought it was really lovely, and I kind of put a pin in it to revisit at some point, and I thought this was a good opportunity to do that. Within the photo I took of the tree and all of its cracked and twisted wood, I searched for opportunities to turn it into a section. So some of these are just like invented imaginary chambers. I ended up calling it the memory and imagination of a fallen tree. So that's the imagination aspect. And the memory aspect ended up being a lot of personal memories related to the project. I depicted our school a little bit and tried to highlight the location of the second-year studio. And I put in the locks and just thought about what it was like to travel between the school and the locks while I was working on that project last year. And then also alluded to a couple different seasons that the canal and the tree has seen. Winter a little bit, summer a little bit, and then also literally drew the tree the way it was last fall and the way it was this spring when it fell. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much. So again, looking in this picture, I think this one gave us all the feels. I think that was a unanimous feeling from the jury, is that this one created in us the most emotion, and it really spoke to us. What I found so incredible and delightful was that you did, as you said right in your introduction, center the tree and center the land itself, whereas the buildings are there, but they're not dominating the story. The story is really from the perspective of this tree and centering that life-giving force in the work. And that is what I found really, truly impactful about it. So I'll let Mena expand.
Oh, congratulations on this piece, really amazing. It's one of the least chromophobic pieces that we have seen. If colors, we need colors. Yes, we have the project, the chromophobic project is a heteronormative one. It's bringing our life into a more dimmer place and having us have less possibilities with color. So I really, really appreciated your use of color. I loved the liquid quality of the drawing. I loved it because what you have done is that you have subverted an inherently violent piece of drawing, which is a section. A section is when you cut something, right? But the water just made everything dissolve. And because it's centered around the tree, it gave it this really emotional feel with the colors. Congratulations on this amazing piece. And she's in my class this year, so.
Well, thank you both for commenting on the second prize. And I guess now I'll let you guess which is the first. So this piece, titled Fossils and Future, Fossils of the Future, is the first prize, which is $2,000.
Wow, thank you. All right, didn't expect this. All right, so just imagine that, I'll start with an introduction. All right, I'm Basil. I am in fourth year conservation, and this is my project, Fossils of the Future. So imagine that you're 5 million years in the future and you're looking at this section of rock. So you have this rock that already exists, like in the current day, and then these are additional layers of rock that build up over the next 5 million years. So here, it might be hard to see in the back. It's really small details, but you could see it like human waste and human skeletons, indicating that humans have gone extinct somewhere in this section here. And then you could slowly see nature reclaiming the world through these sections of rock. And in the end, you see that there's this bird sitting on the grass holding a spear, indicating that nature hasn't only reclaimed the world from humanity, but is on the road to replacing humanity with another intelligent species. Right, and it was inspired by the idea that crows are already using tools, and like 5 million years ago, we were just apes. So who knows, like in 5 million years, like another species might be able to go on the same path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful reading into your work. And I think Manna and Liat are going to speak about this piece.
Thank you. It's beautiful, Basil. We were all struck by the media that you used, the photograph, and we had some discussion about the hand drawing and the photograph, because it said that the hand drawing had to be on top of the photograph. So you took it literally. It's basically on top. So we said, okay, he met the criteria. And what we really appreciated from this is the fact that everything comes from the land. That's basically the basis of everything. And even with us destroying ourselves, the land will continue and survive, but we might destroy ourselves. So the whole storyline was quite evident and quite thoughtful and meaningful. And so there's a great story in there, and it's a wonderful drawing. So thank you, Basil.
Thank you. Oh, I have so many questions for you. Like, is that a mutation or a certain animal? What are they holding? What are they doing? What do they eat for lunch? So many questions. However, I have to say, your technique here is so good. It's like, it exemplifies indignified excellence in which you sway from the neat stylistic ways of architecture, which makes sense because you're from conservation. It's like this, when you said I'm from conservation, everything made sense to me. The cages of stylistic neatness that we sit in, even though it tells a story as a story needs to be told. The fact that you have this conceptualization of death that is quite non-Western, by the way. The fact that death is the bad thing that everybody runs from is not really the story in all of his teams. Death is something that's seen as in other different forms. So here's a very interesting reconceptualization of death, a piece that sits in a post-humanist realm. So I would say go read post-humanism. Feels like you're very invested in it. And the fact that humans are not the center of this says it all. So really, congratulations. And again, the technique. I just kept going closer and closer. I see the small things. I see the keyboard. I see the small things.
Just give it a bit of an explanation. So the reason for all the detail. All right, so late last night, I was in fourth year studio. And yeah, and then I came down to first year studio to keep working on it because I wanted a bit of a change of scenery. But then campus security came in, and they decided that like I was leaving stuff unattended, so they took my house keys, and I wasn't able to get back home. So what else can I do other than like keep working on stippling clouds all night? Yeah. Thank you, campus security, for giving us this project.
Thank you so much.
Wow. So, well, I just want to thank you all for the insights, that you shared about your work and your drawings. I want to thank the jury and also congratulate all the students for participating in this competition in a very short time. And really seeing the school coming together in this way, it's wonderful. I want to congratulate all the finalists, which were all the drawings that were on these boards when we started a couple of hours ago, and of course, all the finalists. Now, we're not quite done. We have a wonderful lecture to follow, So I invited Dr. Constantinos Avramidis to deliver a short lecture, 15 minutes on graffiti and architecture. We're going to need just 2 minutes perhaps to set up. So if you want to have coffee, and there is maybe still some coffee at the back, but in just 2 minutes we're going to resume with the lecture, which is titled Writing Space, Drawing Time, and Archaeology of Graffiti Traces. And I will introduce more Constantinos when we're back in 2 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much. We just need to move this. I wish it was more seamless. This transition, I apologize. Okay.
I'm going to pick up a copy of your book. I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to read it. And I'm sorry I'll be missing your lecture.
I will be talking for complete.
You're going to talk about something else?
Compared to this one, it's an 8-volume, but you might enjoy it because there is a piece on Ottawa.
Oh, I know I'll enjoy it. I can't wait to read it. I'm dying to. Yeah, it has nothing to do. Yeah.
Regulatory spaces,
Okay.
etc. In Ottawa.
So welcome and enjoy, and I'm sorry I have to.
No worries.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
It's the beginning of the semester. I know everyone's like it.
Oh, okay. So we can make
Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you. Looking forward to your lecture. Thank you, Federica, for the opportunity. We had fun.
I'm excited to take it home because now I can see like everybody's drawings.
I drew the woman with the pigeon and the cat.
Pigeon.
I just tagged it.
Well,
Sorry.
she's got a bird on her shoulder and a cat hiding behind her.
Oh, we have this one. It was working until a moment ago.
Oh, I turned it down.
Oh, thank you. So.
Here's the second one.
Yeah, I think Lisa had it before.
I mean, we can use this one. Where is it? He's gonna. That way you can.
But it wasn't because of the panels, because I think now we lost it.
It's all right.
Do you want to
Everyone is tired.
record it, broadcast?
Oh, yeah, it would be wonderful. Yeah. And after yes. Yeah.
Test.
I turned it down.
Yeah. I think that they muted it by accident, so they thought it died.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
that's why they put the button on.
So hopefully people will look at it. So we use this one.
Yeah, you can have this one.
Ah, and I use this one.
1, 2, 1, 2.
This one is good. So just adjust it.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, it's okay. All right.
I have it turned on.
Okay. Oh, maybe care.
Okay, I think we are ready. We're gonna go ahead and start with the lecture and presentation. So if you would like to take a seat. So I'm very pleased to introduce to you again Dr. Constantinos Avramidis. He's a lecturer in architectural landscape at the University of Cyprus. He holds a diploma in architectura from the Aristotle University, Thessaloniki, and a Master of Science in Architecture and Spatial Design from the National Technical University of Athens, and a PhD in Architecture by Design from the University of Edinburgh, where he was awarded the Edinburgh College of Art Scholarship. He has taught extensively at various institutions in Greece and the UK, and most recently at Drury University and the University of Portsmouth. Constantinos co-founded a wonderful journal, Drawing On, Journal of Architecture Research by Design, and is the principal editor of Graffiti and Street Art, Reading, Writing, and Representing the City, which is this wonderful book that, has also a chapter about Ottawa. And so, yeah, we're gonna get reading, yes. And I guess we're pleased now to have you for this lecture, which is titled Writing Space, Drawing Time, and Archaeology of Graffiti Traces. So welcome, Constantinos.
Thanks a lot, Federica. First off, congratulations to all the students for their drawings and their energy. And of course, Federica, for you for having me here. It's a great pleasure and an honor. And also having some familiar faces in the audience as well. To be honest, I was also a bit jealous of the way you guys kick off the semester here with this drawing competition. So hopefully, I understand that you're all tired, but hopefully I'll keep it as short as possible. Okay, so my talk is entitled Writing Space, Drawing Time. And by writing space, I'm referring to a particular practice of occupying and writing in space, graffiti. A graffiti is a graphic trace of an event, and as such, it marks time. Thus, drawing time refers to the temporal dimensions of graffiti drawings. By tracing the traces of the occupants, or the illicit occupants of the surface, if you like, I'm conducting a sort of an archaeological excavation of specific surfaces. Archaeological drawings are all about temporality. Thus, I see them as productive rather than reproductive, whilst questioning architectural drawings imagined neutrality, objectivity, and truth. But before I begin, and going in more detail, please allow me to introduce myself a bit, just to situate the work. So, I've been doing graffiti since the late 90s, which means for, I don't know, how many years now? You've just watched a couple of pieces that I produced during the past decade, which wasn't my most productive one. And at the same time, I've been practicing architecture for several years, just a few projects from the past 5 or so years. And at the same time, I've been continuously researching graffiti since my undergraduate studies, and I edited this volume. But my presentation today is based on one of my most recent research endeavors, my PhD in Architecture by Design, entitled An Atlas of Athenian Inscriptions, a book of drawings of writings and writings on drawings, which has been conducted at the University of Edinburgh. And you're looking at it for the past few seconds. I won't discuss about the atlas as a design object. I've discussed this in my contribution in Federica's amazing recently published volume. Thanks again for that. So the situations that I study here in this talk are all in Athens city center, and reflect 3 important periods in local political history, and they're emblematic that they're the epicenters of historical ruptures during which they are extensively graffitied. So the one is a former Nazi detention center, which operates during the Axis occupation, i.e. early 40s. The second one is the Athens Polytechnic that plays a pivotal role during the student uprising against the Greek military junta. I'm talking about the early 70s here. And the Bank of Greece headquarters building, which is a site of recurring political expression in contemporary crisis. I'm referring to the 2010s here. So the study traverses a wide spectrum of scales: surface, building, and urban landscape. And these scales correspond to different scales of drawings, the writing gestures, I call them, the physical texts, and the urban contexts, respectively. I'll focus on the ones in the middle, and so the building, if you like, the physical context. And at the end, I will briefly mention the gesture drawings, the ones on the top. So in these drawings, every found inscription of each site is documented adopting an appropriate empirical technique. Please note that even though these are digitally produced drawings, the logic of their production is based on analog techniques completely. So don't forget to keep drawing by hand, okay? Even if it's digitally, still it's sort of a hand-drawn thing. I document graffiti in two parallel ways: by digitally retracing graffiti, like the ones on the top, or by directly inserting graffiti photographs in the drawing, like the one at the bottom. So these are not replicates, if you like, but reperformances of an original drawing which is out there. It's the drawing is the building itself. And in a sense, the elevations or the sections that we'll show function here as maps that serialize the graffiti content. And it's a sort of a stratigraphic drawing. So in situation one, it's the area shelter of the National Insurance Company building was turned into a detention center when the edifice was occupied by the Nazis in 1941. The center develops in 2 levels, 6 meters below the ground. It has 4 rooms at the upper level and 3 rooms on the lower, the walls of which are covered with numerous well-preserved graffiti, written of course by the inmates, songs and poems, names and addresses, familiar landscapes and everyday life scenes all coexist on the same surfaces. So I initially used conventional architectural sections to draw the spaces, but it quickly became obvious that the sections couldn't register or show all the walls or communicate the sense of confinement in each space, which led me draw each room separately as an interior panorama, the one that you see on the top. The drawings make one wonder whether the writings aim to transform the interior surfaces into panoramic decorative wallpapers. Of course, wallpaper panoramas we know are quite realistic and so on, but nonetheless, I felt that these inscriptions were serving a similar purpose. They were attempting to bring the outside world inside and even cancel the very nature of the walls. And further, in order to explore the content, I transformed my photographic studies, so I started with photograph myself as well, the middle strip that you see, into text, to the bottom strip that you can see, hopefully, which is like a concrete poem. So this enabled me to make searches for particular names, and these names, appearing twice and 3 times, so on and so forth, allowed me to, they start suggesting peripatetic experiences in each room and a constant reference to the world outside these basements. When one connects the dots with these yellow lines, if you like, so when one connects the sites where the same people left their mark, a sort of a hidden choreography of movements reveals itself. And it is as if the movement in space presents the passing of time in the cell. And As I mentioned, I mean, these drawings register the material traces of past presences, but they also reveal the blatant absence of traces, especially when it comes to the occupiers. So the drawings on the top are from room 1 or 2, and the bottom one is from room 5. So in this world of graffiti, the absence of graffiti is even more important, so which shows us that the occupiers wanting to make sure that no traces of their existence in the space would be left behind. Very quickly, I'm moving to the next situation. I have several drawings to cover. So Athens Polytechnic, which is, by the way, the School of Architecture in Athens, is a monumental complex designed and erected in 1872, yet it is primarily known as the epicenter of the 1973 student uprising that led a few months later to the end of the Greek military junta. In order to document the graffiti in this case, I've chosen to produce a series of photomontages showing how the planned, the line drawing, and the unplanned, the historic graffiti photographs, meet and disrupt each other, much like the chrono sections or the chrono elevations in this case. So these writings come from all historical eras, and if you like, extending this archaeological metaphor that I used, the drawings of the Polytechnic are not collages, but rather like spolia. So fragments that are recomposed in a way that the matrix of architecture dictates. So these drawings disturb one's expectation because they convey a Beaux-Arts building in a non-Beaux-Arts way, because Beaux-Arts drawings are expected to be realistic, whereas here we have a drawing which shows diverse past realities, so it's kind of incomplete. So graffiti here infused contingency, action, and time to the seemingly immobile, inactive, and timeless line drawing. And by deploying this technique, the writings begin to inhabit, affect, and disrupt one another. The distinct texts make different sense when they come together in this multi-temporal layout, and the one is read through the other. We've already reached. How I'm doing with time? I'm okay. Okay. Because I have another page. So the Bank of Greece, quite an imposing building, the Cathedral of Finance and Capitalism in Greece, which was erected in 1932, and imitates, and I'm quote here, imitates the architecture of the Greek Parliament, which was designed 100 years earlier. This is just to say that by graffitiing the Bank of Greece, it is as if you're graffitiing the Greek Parliament. So in order to make sense of the mainly anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist, and crisis-related graffiti on the Bank of Greece, one needs to focus on their spatial serialization, temporal sequencing. And to do so, here, the drawings consist of map elevations, the ones that you see here, upon which each graffiti is positioned, and a series of record cards, which I'll show in a minute, similar to the ones produced by archaeologists when discovering findings. The collective graffiti spans from 2010 to 2015 and is ordered in 13 sets, which are groups of writings before their removal. So we have this writing, obliteration, overwriting, and so on. So despite the large number of writings, I managed to collect 90, to be exact. The Bank of Greece constantly looks untouched from the crisis. The elevation drawings that we saw earlier, however, show exactly the opposite. By superimposing all these writing layers, the drawings record what once was and reveal what it could have been if no removal practices had taken place. And also the records show that the average lifetime of their marks is 2 days, which suggests that there are immediate responses to the writings. And which also tells us that the once offensive image of the bank, at least for the graffitis, it's turned into an offensive new image, which is offensive to the Bank of Greece. Am I talking too quickly? I'm nearly there. So, finally, for each of these case studies, I've produced a one-to-one drawing in order to explore the different conditions of the surfaces. So these drawings suggest different graphic systems, we will call them, which are characteristic to each case. So it's hieroglyphic, palimpsestic, and iconoclastic for the detention center, the Athens Polytechnic, and the Bank of Greece, respectively. And I'll make this clearer, hopefully, here. So the hieroglyphic that I'm talking about is concerned with the peculiar adjacency between images and texts that graffiti suggests. So this photograph becomes this drawing. It took me, by the way, 2 weeks, constantly with more than 8 hours of drawing every single day to complete this drawing. It's insane. I mean, I don't know if you can see the detail, but it's insane. But that's the whole purpose, because that's when things started becoming revealing for me as well. Because these drawings starting to, the graffiti wall appears as a natural landscape. It's like having contours and stuff, but they're barely visible, but still. So making it impossible to separate the material substrate of writing and the text, whilst underlining the haptic experience of drawing and also writing. So the palimpsestic is composed by the overlay of writings of different historical and political eras, such as the 40s, the 70s, and the 2010s. I'm showing the images, the historical images that I used so as to produce this drawing, which highlights the contamination of each other, was also considering writing and removal as similar gestures. And lastly, the iconoclastic, as I call it, which explores how seemingly, I would say, competing agents, namely the graffiti writers and the removers, the buffers, or the official and the unofficial agents, if you like, how they rhythmically meet on the architectural surface to negotiate power over the image of the city or the particular building in this case, and in the process affirm the surfaces often hidden and architectures often hidden multivocal and multitemporal character. 2 short paragraphs, and we're done. So the perverted manner through which drawing techniques are used here, in that they represent architecture retrospectively and document graffiti, which is something that is not normally surveyed, is trying to challenge the orthodoxy of our most commonly used means of drawing, i.e. orthographic drawings. Also, compared to the conventional architectural drawings, which are primarily concerned with the depiction of space in a single frozen moment in time, these drawings record change and agency. They're mainly drawings of time, if you like. Much like Yorgos drawing, I would say. So if Paul Ricoeur is right, and I quote, when arguing that, and I quote, the most valuable traces are the ones that were not intended for our information, end of quote, then by retracing these inscriptions, we're able to animate architecture in its stories. Architecture in its physical body are able to absorb and transmit these stories. By reenacting these stories through drawing enables us animate physical space whilst reconceptualizing architecture as a living storybook awaiting actualizations. And this archaeology of traces, and I quote fellow colleague from Portsmouth, Alex Zambelli. These traces are not a reconstruction of the past, but a propositional narrative of past enacted in the present. And of course, very nicely pointed. So these archaeological methods become compositional in surveys, allowing us to appreciate the critical potency embedded in our conventional modes of drawing. By challenging what is shown and how it is shown, we allow drawings to capture change, human agency, and thus abolishing the imagining authority that we have over drawings and over architecture, and over the production of space, if you like, whilst embracing multivocality and multitemporality. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Constantinos, and thank you for being with us and sharing your research. It's really fascinating to me how, these are, the way that you are, I guess, articulating the life of these ephemeral traces of, deeply rooted political and social consciousness, through your work, and even, I guess, seeing this, this life of the short-lived life of the graffiti and how they transmediate through, other media, social media, and I guess even your own work, and find another kind of temporality in this way. So that's, to me, really fascinating, about, I guess, the process in which you also, I guess, go through in terms of collecting and then retracing and telling those stories. I wonder if there is any question or comments from the audience that you would like to share, or yes, Isabel.
So thank you for the lecture, first of all. It's quite interesting. I had a question about the one-to-one scale drawings that you spent such a long time working on. And I wanted to ask, first of all, why did you choose the one-to-one scale? And then second of all, what did you learn about the building or the story of the building through doing that drawing that you didn't see when you were just looking at the photograph?
So thank you for the question. The one-to-one allowed me to look closer, right? Because these things, the scale of the writings is, at the body scale. Of course, architecture is at the body scale, but proportionally speaking, these things, so as to be seen at a great detail and also appreciate the surface condition, you need to move closer. So by redrawing, the surface allowed me to first off bring different layers together, and then by retracing, and it starts becoming a completely different image. I mean, for instance, the one-to-one drawing of the Nazi detention center, the photograph didn't actually tell me anything about. I wasn't able to see this wall as a sort of natural landscape, and starting being literally unable to separate the writing and its surface, the text, the content, and the graphic surface from each other. It was only after I made this quite weird drawing and creating all these layers of, how the light hits the surface, and I was trying to, follow the lighting condition and the wear of the wall, and while this was coming into rounds around a letter, and was becoming one with the letter, the surface was becoming one with the letter, and so on. So these things starting becoming clear once so it was a sort of a rereading of the surface through drawing means. And same with the other cases for different reasons. And this is how I came up with, let's say, this this idea of the hieroglyphic. The hieroglyphic concept came after I produced this drawing. It wasn't proceeding the procedure of drawing. Yes, maybe the palimpsestic is the most obvious one, but the other ones were due through the process of drawing this in such an intimate scale. Drawing these things in such an intimate scale.
So, Serkan, you have a question? Yes. I found it.
Yeah. Thanks, Kostas. Yasu.
Yeah.
I wonder how you did make the selection of the buildings, because it could be hard, I believe, because Athens is full of graffiti everywhere, especially the Exarchia and all these regions are full of. And I wonder also, like I've been in the Geoponiko, like because Polytechnico and Geoponiko has several similar, I think, generation of paintings and protests. So I also wondered what was the selection criteria of this Geoponiko, Polytechnico difference, or similar, not especially Geoponiko.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. The selection of, we need to zoom out to the overall project now, which makes it a bit tricky due to the time limitations for this lecture, but in a sense, I was trying to associate key buildings to key historical moments. When it comes to, and of course that are also graffitied. The Athens Polytechnic is in Exarchia, the wider Exarchia, the edge of Exarchia neighborhood. Same with Geoponiko. The reason why I've chosen this one instead of the other one is due to its historical, let's say, weight as the epicenter of the uprising, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to the Nazi detention center, it's pretty much the only one that we have with graffiti from that period. Literally, the only one. And we discovered all these writings literally by chance, like 30 years ago. So what else? Bank of Greece, obvious, it's the cathedral finance, and it's also related to the current crisis. Another thing is that all these, in a way, plus another one, which is in my doctoral dissertation, it's 3+1. They're all connected physically through a route of protest. So there's also a physical, of course, through the infrastructural road network, but at the same time as a traditional route of protest, which brings all these together in the city center and start talking to each other. And they also, if we go in more detail, they also have interesting stories about the architects who made them, and so on and so forth. But that's another story.
Janine, and then Susie.
Really beautiful work. Thank you so much for sharing it. Really, it's not a question. It's just, I don't know if have you seen the graffiti near this campus? Because there's a lot just really close, and I don't know if a student could walk you over there, but
yes, please.
Just on the other side of the campus, there's a river, and it runs under a bridge, the Bronson Bridge, and that's a big graffiti site in Ottawa. And there's even a yearly competition event there every fall or late summer. But it's so close to here. I wish I could walk you there, but I've got to leave right now. And I just wanted to say thank you for the lecture and hope someone takes you over there to see that space. But be very beautiful, beautiful drawings. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. And we have 2 more questions.
Hi. I just had a question about the detention center. Through your process of kind of tracking and connecting, like you were saying, the different markings by different people, and connecting and finding these stories, were you able to, per se, track down any of these narratives or uncover any interesting stories from these demarcations, or were you able to kind of identify the people within these graffiti moments?
Thank you for this question. Yes, is the question. The short one, yes, and I've done so. Interestingly, these stories allow us to create our own stories, and effectively, these are my stories of their stories, right? And these, because yes, it's air tracing, but it's a new, if you like, a new graffiti written on paper. But I've also made some research, and I'm currently working on a particular neighborhood. We're working on a project and a book as well, and an exhibition on a refugee neighborhood in Athens, which was quite, let's say, active during the national resistance. And from this neighborhood, you would see quite a lot of people being incarcerated in the Nazi detention center, simply because it was, let's say, in the forefront of the resistance. So I'm trying with the archival research there as well. So this is after my PhD. This is something that I'm doing right now, trying to find, even from the archival research, what was going on and who these people were. But it's also interesting that you could, and I'm trying to do so in my thesis, which is, except for these 3+1 case studies, is also studying the graffiti in Athens in these 3 historical areas in the city center, the entire city center, not just in these 3 buildings. I'm trying to create links to also particular graffiti moments and events outside the basements. So whether this guy who is writing this or this girl who is writing this was a co-student with the other guy who has been assassinated there. So it takes its own, mythology after a while, but.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciate it. It's me over here, sorry. The voice from the audience. Yeah. So thank you so much. Incredible body of work, and I really appreciated the nuance, and really lovely to see a couple of your own pieces of street art in there as well. I wondered if you could say a bit about if your practices of how you document things have shifted along any of the ways that street art is produced. So if some of it's obviously paint, and we see that in your work, but maybe also how it shifts to stenciling, posters, and something I've personally become really preoccupied with are the light projections that are now becoming a kind of swell of movement to show protest or to make a statement on buildings through light projections, which again is this kind of layering of the digital with the physical. So has any of that come on your radar, and has that shifted maybe the way that you document things as you go about your work?
We had a conversation about this, about the media, really, that could be used here. In this case, I was using conventional modes of drawing for a purpose, to challenge the convention of drawing itself. Now, that's one thing about the documentation, and how things are happening in the streets is another story. And how they're infused and enhanced with technologies is, again, a completely different animal. Quite an interesting one, though, simply because, for instance, the Bank of Greece, let's go back to the Bank of Greece, is, and I'm theorizing this in my thesis in a similar manner. So the Bank of Greece, yes, I've drawn it in this way, but it's quite interesting that these photographs and this corpus is I didn't take all these photographs. I found them online, which makes it one of the mostly photographed buildings in Athens when it comes to protests, right? So there's a spectacularity in that, which turns effectively these ephemeral traces, and the photograph internalize them. So they turn them into long-lasting pieces and long-lasting comments. And at the same time, it turns the actual surface into a sort of a hypersurface, right? So again, these are about the slogans and everything. At the same time, graffiti has moved on, and of course it embraced, like no other subcultural formation, Instagram. And Instagram has been a game changer for the graffiti scene, because it detached the risk and the fame and all these things that were associated with the place have been detached. And then, you know, from being all over the city and tagging and so on and so forth, then the aim was to be seen all over Instagram rather than all over the city. So it changed the scale completely and deterritorialized, if you like, the audiences. So, and again, now when it comes to stencil, Banksy, because we're talking about graffiti, we couldn't avoid Banksy. Banksy mentions that stencils look political, who is one of the most notorious stencil makers. Stencils look political by their aesthetics only. There are several reasons why, and why they have been adapted as well. They're easy. You can reproduce a piece several times. The application takes like 3, 5, 10 maximum seconds. So, and there's also a tradition with people like Black Lera from Paris, who has been doing this for several years. And stencils allow the messages to become quite easily, clearly communicated. So that's why they have become, let's say, popular. Have I?
Yeah, that's great. No, this is really nice just to hear some of your thoughts on these things.
I don't remember. You also mentioned about the projection.
Light projections, that was the last one, yeah.
That removes completely the materiality as well of the intervention. Yes, we also talk about light graffiti, right? But I mean, if I were, yes, of course, the term graffiti is volatile and with a lot of baggage, but I wouldn't term this kind of intervention as graffiti, but something else. Yes, protest, public art, probably graffiti, I'm not so sure. Unless they're there somehow to facilitate a trace of sorts, a physical trace of sorts.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the question. And for the very long, very, very long answer.
Here it is.
I can stay here forever, so help yourself.
Mostly I just wanted to congratulate you and thank you for your presentation. It was so beautiful. Just to see how rigorously, your methods were and the techniques that you developed to sort of analyze and synthesize this creative practice. And I guess I'm curious about the bookending projects that you presented. I didn't know you were a graffiti artist yourself or had been in the past. I'm curious about that, where, I imagine that, established the origins for your research. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you understood that practice at the time. Was it purely a creative practice? Was it a political practice? And if you were now to go back to that medium of working, how would you view it differently? And do you have any interests now that you've decoded and analyzed and understood all of these different facets of the medium, how would you approach your work as a creative practitioner of graffiti art today? Or are you over it? Have you analyzed it to the point of just, it's reached its logical conclusion through that one-to-one, super intensive drawing?
It never ends.
Never ends.
Never ends. As we all know, when it comes to creative research or by design practice, you know very well. There's no end there. But it's quite an interesting question if and how this affected my graffiti practice, if that's a question. I'm not sure. Because there's, these hardcore subcultural doctrines which we subscribe to without knowing why we do so, but we do. And we cannot escape them. And then we have architecture liberating us from something that should have liberated us in the first place, but that's another story. But it's interesting for me right now to consider the ways to turn these, yes, of course, it's a book object, yes, there are drawings, yes, all this stuff, but how you return this back to the city, that was one of my main concerns after the PhD. And, I've even started thinking of augmenting this, this research becoming sort of an augmented reality where you literally remap the city. You go, but you need to go there to also see all these layers in front of you, or so to make you, let's say, literally and physically remap the city yourself, or and even more so, one of my concerns was how you effectively take this body of work and physically paint it back to the city, and what happens when this happens, which is one of my forthcoming projects. And literally taking these, because as I mentioned earlier, these effectively are, yes, these are all the graffiti that are out there. I take them in and I produce my own in drawing though. But if these drawings go back on the walls where they originate, that's the project now. It took me quite a while to realize that, to be honest.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Constantinos, especially for joining us in Ottawa,
Thank you for having me here.
for sharing your research and being part of the Murray Murray.
I hope it resonates to some of the students and
Yes.
faculty in relation to their work on drawing. So thanks again for having me here.
Thank you very much.